Good afternoon, dear students and learners. Namaskar. You all are watching us on eVidya channel number 5 and also on our YouTube channel, that is NCRT Official, and I am Kusum Prasad. So, dear students, get ready to study English, and this session is for class 5 students. And we are going to study chapter 3, My Shadow, and also Robinson Crusoe discovers a footprint. To teach this subject, our today's expert is Dr. Amit Ranjan sir. Welcome sir. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Hello
sir
students.
is assistant professor from CIET and CRT. So dear students and learners, you can send your feedback, your queries through our various medium. You can contact us through our phone number. You can call us on 8800440559, and you can also email us on our email ID, that is dth.class5@ciet.nic.in. And apart from this, you can also send your queries, your feedback on our YouTube channel, that is NCRT Official. So before starting this session, we want to share a very important announcement. On 11th May, we celebrate National Technology Day every year. The theme of the day for this year is Schools to Startups, Ignitizing Your Mind. On this occasion, the Honorable Prime Minister will be addressing the nation, so stay connected with all 12 p.m. eVidya channels at 11 a.m. tomorrow to watch this program live. So now it's time for the session, and this session is for class 5 students, and the subject is English, and we move to our expert Dr. Amit sir. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Thanks a lot, ma'am. So today we have two very interesting pieces. One is My Shadow, which is a poem by Robert Louis Stevenson, who study My Shadow. And R.L. Stevenson was a poet of the 19th century between 1850 and 1894. Let's look at the poem. My Shadow. If I have a little shadow that goes in and out with me, and what can be the use of him is more than I can see. He is very, very like me from the heels up to the head, and I see him jump before me when I jump into the bed. The funniest thing about him is the way he likes to grow, not at all like proper children, which is always very slow, for he sometimes shoots up taller like an India rubber ball, and he sometimes gets so little there's none of him at all. He hasn't got a notion of how children ought to play, and can only make a fool of me in every sort of way. He stays so close beside me. He's a coward, you can see. I think shame to stick to nursey as the shadow sticks to me. One morning very early before the sun was up, I rose and found the shining dew on every buttercup, but my lazy little shadow, like an arrant sleepy head, had stayed at home behind me and was fast asleep in bed. Isn't it a nice poem, Sumbi?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now let us look at it line by line and see what the poet is trying to say. I have a little shadow that goes in and out with me. So here the protagonist, the person who's narrating this poem, who's telling this story, is telling that he has a little shadow that goes in and out with him, and what can be the use of him is more than I can see. So the thing about shadows is they accompany you everywhere, and first we need to understand, and which is where we need to understand a little bit of science behind this also, so we can understand the property of shadows. So shadow is nothing but a lack of light. There is a source of light coming upon me, and behind me, because my body is blocking this light that is coming at me, there will be a shadow behind me. So that is how the sun is falling upon you and your body blocks that light, and that forms the shadow, the black thing that falls behind you or ahead of you, depending where you are positioned. So that is what a shadow is. So I have a little shadow that goes in and out with me. So wherever you will go, the shadow will go with you, because the light source is projecting on you, the light is falling on you all the time, and the lack of light will also follow you all the time, because you are the body blocking that light. So a shadow will always go with you. And so there are multiple stories, legends. Human beings have always been fascinated with shadows from times immemorial. We will talk about a couple of stories from mythology later on, but first let's see what Stevenson has to say. So the shadow goes in and out with me all the time, and what can be the use of him is more than I can see. And the poet wonders, what is the use of this shadow more than just seeing it, or actually not seeing it, because it is the lack. Okay, and what are the properties of this shadow? What does the poet find? He is very, very like me from heels up to the head. So given that your body is blocking the light, it will capture your features also. The shape of your fingers, the shape of your head is exactly where the light won't fall behind you or ahead of you, and so the shadow will acquire your shape, and therefore the shadow is like me, is of a similar shape, and I see him jump before me when I jump into my bed. So also when you jump, you are blocking light as you jump, and so the shadow will also jump with you. So the shadow basically would do everything that you do, because it is blocking light as you move by. And so this is very fascinating for the poet, that he is observing the shadow. As he walks, the shadow walks; as he jumps, the shadow jumps, and the shadow also looks like him. So in a way, the shadow becomes a part of us. Right, let's look at the next stanza. The funniest thing about him is the way he likes to grow. I wish I had brought some more visuals to demonstrate how this happens, but a shadow grows and a shadow becomes small as well, depending on where the light source is placed. So let us take the sun for example. You would see that in the evening your shadows are very long, because the sun has gone down the horizon. As you see, as the sun is setting, it is almost at the horizon. During the midday, the sun is high up above the horizon, and at 12 in the noon you would see that your shadow is very small, whereas later in the afternoon your shadow becomes much bigger. If you are facing the sun, it is behind you. If your back is facing the sun, your shadow will be in front of you, and it will be very long. So your shadows will be very long in the morning and evening, and this is an exercise I want you to do. Go out in the evening when the sun is setting and see how long your shadow is. Go out in the afternoon around between 12 and 1 and see how small your shadow is, and your shadow will increase in size between noon and sunset, and this is very interesting. And so the poet is saying the funniest thing about him is the way he likes to grow, not at all like proper children, which is always very slow. So this is from a child's perspective, of course, this entire poem, that a child is observing the shadow for the first time and is fascinated by it. And children grow very slowly. In a year probably you grow by an inch when until the age of 16 or even lesser than that, whereas a shadow, it could be 1 foot at 12 p.m. and at 6 p.m. in the summer you would see that the shadow is 8 feet long. And this is not just about the sun. You will see at night, if you are standing under a street light, if you are just standing under, the shadow will be very small. If you are far away from the street light, or if the light source is just behind you, if there is a light at the level of the road, you will see that your shadow is much longer, or if you are standing far away from the light. So it depends how the light is blocked by your body and how the rays are reaching the other side. So in your science classes you will also learn about shadow formation and how light and the body intercepting the light are responsible for formation of shadows. For sometimes he shoots up taller like an India rubber ball, and he sometimes gets so little that there is none of him at all. And this is what we were just now talking about, that sometimes at sunset, or if you are standing far away from a light source, say if you are standing in front of a car at night in a dark place, and you will see that your shadow is very long, And so why the reference to India rubber ball? Because and India rubber is because rubber plantations were first found in India. They are rubber trees, they are cuts made on its branches, on its bark, and the sap that oozes out, that liquid that oozes out, is collected in coconut shells. That becomes rubber, and this rubber has the property of being elastic. So of course you know how balls bounce up and down, and balls made of rubber bounce particularly quite a lot because of the property of rubber to bounce. So sometimes the shadow bounces up. Suddenly if you are standing on a road in the dark and the car's lights up, you will see that there is a very long shadow in front of you. And whereas if you are standing under a light, or if you are standing when there is no light, when there is only clouds, or like I said, when there is noon, when the sun is high up straight above you, and then the shadow will be very small. So it's a very beautiful poem which is explaining both the fascination of a child as well as how scientifically shadows are formed. All right. This third stanza is not in your book. The poem has been shortened a bit from 4 stanzas to 3 stanzas, but we'll do this, the entire original poem, because it's always advisable to read the entire text. They are often shortened in the book. He hasn't got a notion of how children ought to play. Who hasn't got a notion? The shadow. So shadow has been personified. The shadow is being treated like a human being because the shape is that of a human being. He hasn't got a notion of how children ought to play. So the child is complaining that the shadow does not know how children should play. Ought means should. That sometimes becomes so small, sometimes becomes so big, and it's very difficult for a little child to jump so much as the shadow jumps. So the shadow does not know how children should play, and he can make a fool of me in every sort of way. And so while this child is trying to jump and probably jumps 3 feet, 4 feet, the shadow could dramatically become 10 foot longer. 10 foot long is to switch off the light or change the light source, becomes very small. So children, of course, so the child is trying to imitate the shadow but barely can, because shadow is a property of light, and light is something that travels the fastest in all the universe. He stays so close behind me, he is a coward, you can see. So of course the shadow is always with you, either in front of you or behind you, depending where the light is coming from, as we have been discussing. So somebody who is walking behind you is a coward. Somebody who is scared of you, afraid of you, somebody who does not have the courage to face you. So the child thinks of the shadow as a coward because probably the light in this case is coming from front, and so the shadow is behind, and the shadow is always, and whenever you look behind you see the shadow chasing you. So it's like a coward person who is following you but is not able to face you. And that is the beauty of poetry, how metaphors are drawn in, and the shadow is given the property of a human being who's sneakily following this child. I would think shame to stick to nursey as that shadow sticks to me. So nursey here is somebody who takes care of a child, a babysitter, a caretaker. So like a child is embarrassed by the caretaker always pampering him, giving him things. The child wants to grow up and be on his own, independent. And so the children who stick to the caretaker, to the nursey, other children make fun of that child because he wants too much care, too much attention. And so he's saying that it is like, I am ashamed to stick to the nursey, to the caretaker, that this shadow is sticking to me like that, like a child sticking to a caretaker. So very beautiful allusions and comparisons the poet has made in this poem. Kusumji.
Yes, sir.
The final stanza. One morning very early before the sun was up, so before the sunrise. So what did we discuss earlier? That at sunrise and at sunset the shadow will be long. But just before sunset, what do you see in the sky? It's dark, turning blue slowly, and slowly it turns orange, but the sun is not yet up. I rose and found a shining dew on every buttercup. Buttercup is a flower. And at night what happens is the moisture in the air condenses because of the cold and settles as drops on flowers and leaves. And that is called dew. And so you can see in the image also these dew drops. If you get up early morning, go for a walk, you will see it on flowers and leaves. So I rose, rose means to rise up. Rose is the past tense of rise, not the flower. I rose and found the shining dew on every buttercup. So every buttercup flower had these tiny little droplets of water on them, but my lazy little shadow like an errant sleepy head. But my lazy little shadow. So the boy is sleeping and there is no shadow, because at night you switch off the light and sleep, and in the morning the sun has not risen. There is just color of the sky, so there is no big source of light. You can see things because the sun is rising, and I would not go and explain the science of it right now, how the earth is round, how the sun rises above horizon. All that you learn in your science classes, in a couple of classes, probably in class 6. But at that point of time there is no direct source of sunlight early in the morning, and so there is no shadow. But my lazy little shadow like an errant sleepy head. Errant is something that is extreme. So if you want something very badly, then you are errant. But if you are okay, if there is some sort of negotiation that is possible between you and your parents, then you are moderate. Errant is somebody who is extreme. So early morning you want to sleep, so it's errant sleepy head. You really want to sleep, you don't want to wake up at that point of time. Your father and mother come and shake you up to go to school, and it's only then that you go. But my lazy little shadow like an errant sleepy head. So the shadow is like a sleeping child, is not going to wake up, had stayed at home behind me and was fast asleep in bed. So the child says that I went out and there was no shadow. Why was there no shadow? By now you know, because there was no light source, there was no powerful light source to create the shadow. And so the child says that my shadow is still sleeping in the bed, whereas I have woken up. So as you can see, it's a very beautiful poem which explains the scientific concept of shadow, as well as makes it very poetically ornamental, brings on all these things about shadow sleeping and things like that. Or in the previous one where you saw that the shadow was compared to a coward, or how a shadow sticks to a person like a little child sticks to his caretaker. Good. And Kusumji, through centuries human beings have been fascinated with shadow. What is the shadow after all? Why does it follow us? And so even in our mythology we have a lot of shadow. So once when Hanumanji was flying from Rameshwaram to Lanka to get Sitaji back, his shadow on the ocean was captured by a demoness, and he could not move, because if you move, your shadow moves. So the mythology, Ramayana, assumes the opposite. If you capture the shadow, you also capture the person. And so Hanuman was unable to fly any further, and so what he did, he entered through the mouth of the demoness and destroyed her from within, and that is how his shadow was freed. Alright, so let us look. We have already looked at all these words. India rubber ball, like I said, balls are formed with rubber. Rubber was discovered in India. There were rubber plantations set up by the British in India, and that is why it's called the India rubber ball, and it has got great elastic properties. You bounce it on the ground, it bounces so high. And the poem uses the metaphor, the example of India rubber ball in this poem to show how shadows can jump if the light source is played with. Errant, we saw, is something that is extreme, and an errant sleepy head is somebody who's very sleepy. And a buttercup is a kind of a flower, and it's your job to find out if you have any buttercups in your garden. So that was the poem My Shadow by R.L. Stevenson, and if you have any questions you can keep asking us. Meanwhile, we have some time left for Robinson Crusoe, which is a very famous story. You have got only a very small part of the story, like 3 pages. Let's quickly read through it. So this story was written by Daniel Defoe in 1719. So 300 years ago, this story was written. 303 years, 304 years ago, this story was written by Daniel Defoe. It's an adventure tale of a person who is stranded on an island alone, and how he lives his life over there, and so on and so forth. So very quickly let's read it, and maybe in a subsequent session we can talk about Daniel Defoe and Robinson Crusoe in detail. One day when I was going toward my boat, I was surprised to see the footprint of a man on the sand. I stood amazed. So like I said, this is the story of a person. This is a novel written in 1719 about a person who gets stranded on an island. And you would know an island is a place which is surrounded on all 4 sides by water. Something that is surrounded on 3 sides by water is a peninsula, like the Indian peninsula. The South Indian states are surrounded on 3 sides. The 4th side is land, so that's a peninsula. Australia is an island. Caribbean is an island. Caribbean is a chain of islands. So we are talking about the Caribbean islands. One day when I was going towards my boat, I was surprised to see the footprint of a man on the sand. I stood amazed. I listened. I looked around me. I could neither hear nor see anything. I went up higher to look down. I went up the shore and down the shore, but it was no good. I could find no other footprint but that one. So here, the hero of the story, alone on an island, nobody apart from him lives there, and other animals, finds a footprint. I went again to see if there were more footprints, and to tell if it had been my imagination. But I was not mistaken, for there was exactly the print of a foot, toes, heel, every part of the foot. So a human foot is different from other animals' feet. A dog's foot is different, cat's foot is different, tiger's, wolf's feet are different. So of course it was a jungle on an island, so there was Robinson Crusoe and other animals, but one day he saw the footprint of a person, and he was baffled that somebody else lives over there. And he matched the footprint to see the way human toes are shaped and human leg and ankle is shaped, and all of it was matching. I could not imagine how it could be there. I stayed a long time thinking, but became more and more confused. At last I returned home very frightened. So the use of home is very interesting over here. So this person, Robinson Crusoe, gets stranded on this island. Then he found a cave, put wooden branches over there, and started calling it home. Looking behind me after every 2 or 3 steps. So he was very afraid that there is another person. Why was he afraid? Because according to stories of this time, they were cannibals. Cannibals, the spelling is C-A-N-N-I-B-A-L-S. I repeat, C-A-N-N-I-B-A-L-S. Cannibals are people who eat people. Human beings who eat human beings. That's a scary thought, isn't it? And so he looked behind him to see if there was anybody else, because there were rumors that there were cannibals on this island, human beings who could eat him. So, and when you are scared, you assume everything is a human being. You see a tree and you think it's a human being. When I came to my cave, which I called my castle, I ran inside it as if I was being chased. I do not remember whether I used the ladder or went by the hole. So he ran very fast to get back to his cave. He was always afraid that there is somebody behind him, which I called the door. I ran for cover faster than any other animal could run. I did not sleep that night. The more I thought about what I had seen, the more afraid I became. I thought it would be one of the savages of the mankind who had wandered out to the sea into a small boat. It maybe could be another person like Robinson Crusoe who got stranded on the island, and then that would be good, because then he would have some company. Luckily I was not on the shore at that time, but what if he had seen my boat? If he had seen my boat, he would have realized that somebody lived on the island and would soon return with others to kill and eat me. So if it was cannibal, a person who eats human beings, he would return with his mates, his friends, and eat him up. and so I lay fearful for many days and prayed for protection. In doing so, I was very much comforted and began going out to investigate. But even as I went forward, I looked behind me frequently because I was still very frightened. However, as I went about for 2 or 3 days, I saw nothing. I became a little bolder. I decided to go down to the shore again and examine the footprint once more. I decided to measure it with my own footmark. As I came closer to my footprint, I realized it could not be my footprint because I had not come to this part of the beach since a long time. Secondly, as I placed my foot alongside that footprint, it seemed larger than my own. My fear returned. I went home again, believing there was somebody there. The island was inhabited. Inhabited means that there were other people living on the island. So the fear of the hero, Robinson Crusoe, comes true. The footprints match. There is somebody else on the island. So the whole description is about being afraid of somebody else living there, of cannibals, humans who eat humans, and so he's suddenly living in this terror. And a lot more happens in this novel. So in the next session for class 5, we will cover Robinson Crusoe in detail.
Yes, sir. And it was very beautiful and interesting session, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
And dear students and learners, before we wind up this session, we want to share a very important announcement related to G20 and NCERT textbooks. We are proud that India assumed the G20 presidency and will convene the G20 Leaders Summit for the first time in the country in 2023. A nation deeply committed to democracy and multilateralism, India G20 presidency would be a watershed moment in her history as it seeks to play a very important role by finding pragmatic global solution for the well-being of all. And in doing so manifest the true spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or the world is one family. The NCERT textbooks for 2023 and 24 are available throughout the country, and these textbooks may be purchased directly from NCERT sales counter located at New Delhi, Ahmedabad, Bengaluru, Kolkata and Guwahati, and these sales counter will be functional on all the weekdays including gazetted holidays, Saturdays, Sundays from 9:30 am to 6 pm. And you may place order for the books online from our website ncertbooks.ncert.gov.in, and these books will be delivered at your doorstep with no delivery fee. And if you want the soft copy of the books in PDF version, you can also download for free from NCERT, Diksha and ePathshala website and mobile app. So dear students and learners, please visit the website ncert.nic.in to know more about the authorized vendor. तो ये था हमारा आज का इंग्लिश का सेशन, और लेकिन अभी हमारे बहुत सारे रोचक और ज्ञानवर्धक सत्र अभी और हैं, तो जुड़े रहिए eVidya चैनल से। कुछ ही पलों में हम फिर से हाजिर होंगे। eVidya के अगले सत्र में हम बात करेंगे कक्षा 5 के हिंदी के विषय पर, तो आप कुछ ही देरों के बाद फिर हाजिर होइएगा और बने रहिए eVidya चैनल पर, और हमें फिलहाल दीजिए इजाज़त। नमस्कार।